Those Were the Days is filmed before a live internet audience.
It's a beautiful day in podcasting, a beautiful day for a listener. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a podly day in this beauty cast, a podly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a listener just like you. I've always wanted to record a podcast just for you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my listener? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please, won't you be my listener?
Love it.
Hey, listener. Or hey, watcher on the Twitch or the YouTubes. This is Those Were the Days, the podcast that looks back at classic TV that was and talks about it with modern eyes right now. So we're diving into educational shows, and if it wasn't easily apparent, this week we are talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Now, this is a show that I definitely need my neighborhood friends to talk about. And here with me are, from the electronics store 2 blocks over, Travis.
I love the fact that Fred Rogers drinks pineapple juice. That, for some reason, that just made my day.
And that it only cost $0.25.
Mm-hmm.
That made me a little sad.
And from the car shop around the corner, we have Steven.
I have been proposing a hypothetical question to my friends of late. If you could replace the faces on Mount Rushmore with anyone in history, presidents or not, who would you pick? And the first pick for me was an easy one. Fred Rogers is going right up there in a prime spot.
And from the sewing shop just down the street, Amy.
Learned a lot of things from Mr. Rogers, but probably the one that comes up the most is the fact that I can say, I'll clean this up later if going to the bakery is an option.
Yes. Yes. So, we're talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Is there anybody who doesn't have history with this show? Is there anybody that has not watched it of this crew?
My question is, did anybody else get really comforted when the opening theme started?
When that opening theme started, I was instantly transported to my grandmother's living room. I knew the TV. I could see the TV that I was watching it on, sitting on the exact couch and the pattern that was the couch, and watching the show and listening, having my grandma right there as well. Like, it's right where I went, and it was amazing.
In my house, Mr. Rogers was a unit of time measurement. So it's like, when are we doing this thing? All right, well, it's going to be 2 Sesame Streets and a Mr. Rogers. Fantastic. Thank you. I understand these numbers.
Yep. For me, it was arriving to kindergarten early. You would sit out in the little. There's like a pod of classrooms, and you sit out in the center room and watch something on TV. Because this was before they put us in a gym to play ball. They put us down in front of the TV. It was the early '90s. This was magic.
Mhm.
And you would watch one of a couple things. There'd be either Reading Rainbow would be on, or you would be watching Mr. Rogers. So I was crisscross applesauce watching Mr. Rogers on the rollaway TV.
Nice. Yeah, I don't have specifics like this is when I watch it. I just remember watching it all the time. Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street and Reading Rainbow.
Thanks,
But yeah,
PBS.
Yeah, PBS.
exactly.
I would give all my adult money to that place. Like they've
And-
earned it.
Well, and then we'll talk about it. Thanks, Mr. Rogers himself.
Mm.
So, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was a show that ran from 1968 to 2001. Now, there's been plenty of essays and interviews and now films and stuff that have told us all about Mr. Rogers. I'm guessing a lot of us have seen those too. So I'm not going to go into like the full history, but I think we need to do a little biography on good old Fred. And then we'll dig into the episode we watched. So Fred McFeely Rogers, his full name, was born in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh in 1928. He grew up and got his bachelor's degree in music in 1951. Now he was thinking about going to seminary because he was, a very religious guy for anybody who doesn't know. But then he came home from college and TV was becoming a thing. And he knew it was something that he could do to serve and teach kids, and that he was called to do that. So, right after that, he moved to New York to work for NBC, but he kind of hated commercial television.
We
So
all
he moved
hate
back to,
commercial
Yeah, I
television.
mean, we
yeah,
all agree.
I mean, yeah. So he moved back to Pittsburgh and he actually helped to found WQED, the first community supported TV station in the country and the fifth public television station. Um, so he worked from them from 1954 to 1962. Um, and he worked on developing, he did a lot of stuff for the TV station, programming wise, and developed his first show, which was the Children's Corner. Um, and it was had a lot of the bones of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, except he never was in front of the camera. He was always writing the songs and stuff, making puppets and everything. Um, and in the middle of all this, he decided, yeah, I kind of still want to do that seminary thing. So, like during his lunch breaks, he would do courses um, for Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, and he got his bachelor's of divinity in 1962. He was ordained as a Presbyterian minister in 63 with a special charge to serve children and families through television. So,
Kinda
like,
awesome.
Yeah.
yeah, like it wasn't just, hey, I want to go be a minister. It's like, hey, I want to be ordained to do this. And the church was like, cool, do it. So in 63, he moved to Canada. He worked for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which was their public broadcasting. And he created the show Mr. Rogers, just Mr. Rogers. And that was more of the precursor of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, because this is the one where he finally got the courage and encouragement to say, hey, you're good at this, get in front of the camera. In 66, he came back to Pittsburgh and adapted what we know now and created Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And it was aired nationally in 1968. So, um, yeah. And that was just the beginning of what he would do for children and for public broadcasting itself. So, he was a champion for children, for talking to children about real issues, the mental health of children. He was also very much a champion of public television. Um, and one of the things he's most well known for is his testimony in 1969 before a Senate subcommittee that was considering cutting funding for public television. Um, you can see this, it's widely available on YouTube.
Yeah, if
Definitely,
anybody hasn't seen it, like, you absolutely have to go watch it. It is
right.
real good.
Go watch
Yes.
it because they were considering cutting like 10 million. It was the transition from the Johnson to Nixon White House. Nixon had already said he was considering cutting the funding when he gets there. Um, but this subcommittee was headed by a senator named John Pastor, think of Rhode Island. After 2 days of hearings, he wasn't impressed with anybody. And then Fred Rogers spoke. Now, you can tell when you watch the video, Senator Pastor had no clue who Mr. Rogers was. Okay, it's like a year after his show is airing nationally in this
Right.
medium of TV, which, isn't as in everybody's face the way it is today. Um, he'd never seen Mr. Rogers before. And you can watch how Mr. Rogers' testimony about attending to children, about teaching children and giving them something more than just people bonking each other over the head. needs to be given to children. And it broke Pastor. Like, you could see the footage of him crying there as he's learning the simple things Fred Rogers is telling him. Congressional funding for PBS went from 9 million to 22 million.
And Pastor was a well-known, like, he was coming in like a hammer. And it was known like you're never going to get past him. He's ruthless, he's cutting everything. So it
And
speaks volumes to the impassioned speech of Mr. Rogers that they were able to turn to him.
right. And especially considering it was about just a little under 7 minutes of testimony from Fred Rogers. It was not a huge, long speech. I think he had some information that he wanted to share. And he's like, you guys can read this later. Here's what I want to say. And he said his
Good
piece.
Lord.
The next year, Nixon appointed Rogers as the chair of the White House Conference on Children and Youth. So,
All right. Well, so that's like a win in the Nixon column.
yeah.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
all right. Everybody gets
Uh-huh.
one.
Nixon had a handful of things. We didn't get into it here,
Yeah.
but he did have a handful of wins.
So that's the kind of guy who was talking to and teaching kids on a 30-minute show for over 30 years.
And we're all better for it.
Yeah.
We're all so much better for it.
And if
Yeah.
you think about that 7 minutes, 7 minutes of Fred Rogers' time is like 35 words, really. It's like
Yeah,
so
that's true.
slow and patient.
Yeah.
Like he didn't have to say a lot in those 7 minutes. Just what he said mattered a lot.
So that's who he is. And we watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood Season 7, Episode 7, according to Amazon. Number 1324. I was digging in. It's this episode actually aired towards the end of season 6. It was episode 64 of that season.
You know.
Like,
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers didn't take that much of a break compared to other television shows.
The lives of the future is at stake in his mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was no
Yeah.
time to take breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we open the episode as always. Mr. Rogers coming in singing his song, which again, as Amy said, was just a warm blanket to get
I do
cozy
wonder
up to.
because I like when we started getting like smartphones with fun photo apps and tilt shift was like all the rage, and I was very into tilt shift. I mean, I still love tilt
Mhm.
shift, and so I was watching the opening when we're flying through the model of the neighborhood, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Is this why?"
I mean,
Is this-
it's definitely a big reason because I love miniature photography anyway.
Yeah.
I do too.
And
Mhm.
and I'm with you on tilt shift is super fun.
It's great.
And to see this little miniature neighborhood and just the camera flying around in there, and I was just like, oh, take me back, and just
Especially knowing how big that camera is.
Yeah,
We're gonna
yes.
do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's actual tape in that thing.
Uh-huh.
And it's one of those things where I haven't actually sat down and watched an episode in years. And it was like, oh yeah, there's the actual neighborhood that they go
Yeah.
through.
I
Like,
haven't
that's
watched
part of it.
easily many decades, but I knew every word to the songs.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right, so we open up. He gets on his sweater. He gets on his comfy shoes. And then he goes in and he shows us a star spinner. A little star spinner. I'm like, what game is that for? But it
He
wasn't
got
for
it
anything.
yesterday. I don't, and I'm like, this is great. This is the thing I would do.
Mhm.
You're like, look, I got this thing. Look
Yeah.
at this thing.
And that was the thing. Like, I'm sitting here thinking, what kind of board game does that go with? It's like, no, no board game. It's just this. This is you play with it.
That was
Check it
enough
out.
for the for his demographic. Like, oh,
Yeah.
look at that
Oh,
cool
yeah.
thing. It's got colors and a thing that
Absolutely.
spins. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to make one
Fidget
of those.
spinners is ahead of his time.
Yeah, pretty much.
He really knew what was up.
And so then he goes, he's like, hey, why don't we draw a star? Here, I'll come teach you. And he goes over to his other, I want to call it a kitchen area because that's what I think of it with the house.
Kitchen. I think it's the kitchen.
Yeah, it's a kitchen, but
Is
it's
he-
got all
I
kinds of
think-
other stuff.
I think he's cooked in there before.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
think.
yeah, definitely.
So
No, one of my notes was like the set when he walks down the stairs into the kitchen area. I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's like I'm just being assaulted left and right by these memories coming back
Mhm.
and seeing that and just like, yeah, it's just one after the other. And, the camera pans over and you see the stoplight that was hanging on that wall. And
Mhm.
he goes into the kitchen and you got that old school refrigerator that's like built
Yeah.
into the wall the way it is, sunk
But
back like that. And I was just,
right
oh,
after the stoplight, he passes the fish.
Fish
Yep,
tank
the fish tank.
with the neon tetras.
Yeah, he didn't feed them this time, but
No.
you know, which if you've ever if you haven't heard the story, when he feeds the fish, like after a certain point, he specifically talks about feeding the fish because there was a little boy that wrote in that was blind and was concerned that he wasn't feeding the fish. And so Mr. Rogers, after that letter, made it a point to every time he feeds the fish to specifically say he's feeding the fish so that those who couldn't see him would know exactly what he's doing.
I wonder how much that impacted the rest of the show moving forward after he was given. Because Mr. Rogers, like, I'm sure we'll get into this, but one of the things that he is most well known for is the level of empathy he
Hmm.
had
Yeah.
towards literally every human being on the planet. So when he hears someone is concerned, he's going to address it because he's
Yeah.
going to take that on himself. And it's like, if that were me, I would sure want to know that the fish were being fed. It makes you wonder what other
Hmm.
actions he started taking to better provide blind kids or blind anybody really with the visual, or the audio description of what I'm after. So I wonder if you were to go
Hmm.
back and watch after that, how much stuff he'd say, like, oh, and you probably wouldn't notice if you have sight that he's even doing it, but how much
Right.
Right.
sports casting he's doing of his own actions to help provide. That just popped in my head. Like that could be an interesting study to see how it
And
impacted his stuff.
it reminds me of another one in the good guy pantheon that I'm sure will turn up on this show eventually. Bob Ross, who spoke to someone at I forget if it was a letter or an event or whatever. And the person was like, "Listen, I love what you do, but I can't paint. I'm colorblind." And so he did one in all black and white. He's like, "Let's go. No
Yeah.
problem. Not a
Nice.
problem. You can absolutely do
Amazing.
it."
That's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, so here he teaches us how to draw stars and teaches us how to draw stars with more than just 5 points. But he makes a note to say 5 lines,
Mhm.
5 points for this star.
Mhm.
Do one with
Mhm.
more. Hey, 6 lines, and then we have 6 points.
Okay, real quick. When he pulled the paper and that marker out, did anyone else immediately smell
I could
that
smell it.
permanent marker?
Yep.
Oh,
I could
yeah.
smell it.
It was like
Mhm.
I could smell that marker and I could hear the sound of that marker on the paper.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also, if you notice, he always would take 2 pieces of paper because that would bleed through
Yeah.
to the
Mhm.
next
Sure would.
one.
Yeah.
It'll bleed through like 8 pieces of paper. Have you ever used
Yes,
those
it will.
markers? It's
Mhm.
ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
Your mom gets so mad you drawing on stuff and it's just all over the table because you just
Yep.
didn't use multiple pieces of paper. Maybe that's just me. I thoroughly remember my
No,
mom
it definitely
being
Yeah.
unhappy.
definitely happened to me.
Ours is really dark stained wood, so we got away with a lot of it.
Yeah.
I
What
only
what
had to learn it
happened
once.
what happened with me, right? So he does a 5 point star. I'm like, yes, excellent. And he does the 6 point star. I'm like, yes, I'm aware. And he goes, let's do one with 8. And so I go in my head, I know how we're gonna do this. And then I'm like, we're gonna do 2 squares and we're gonna offset them, and that's
Yes.
gonna be great. And then he was like, nope,
No.
just gonna draw it with 8. And I was like, well, okay, Mr. Rogers, have at it then, I guess.
And did a lot better than I could have done.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I
In that
can't do
one.
8. Are you
Like,
kidding me?
I'm sure he practiced, before
Oh,
taping, but
sure.
still, the fact that he nailed it that
He
time,
wasn't tracing.
No.
no,
No,
Like
not at
no.
all.
he was doing that straight up. And I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. And then, he uses that to say, hey, let's talk about the stars at night. And then he goes over to picture.
Picture.
All right.
Oh,
I don't
man.
remember a ton of very specific things from Mr. Rogers, but the video of how they make Mr. McFeely comes over and brings a video on how they make crayons.
Dude.
And
Yes.
Yes.
that is why I watched for years how
Yeah.
it's made. I
Yeah.
guarantee like how it's
Oh, yeah.
made was made by people that watched the
Uh-huh.
crayon video on picture.
We just
My
had a
wife
moment.
asked.
with
My
this
wife
guy.
asked if that was the episode I was going to pick. I was like, if I could have found it easier.
That changed my life.
Yes.
as a 4 or 5-year-old,
Mhm.
how to make crayons is
Mhm.
what has driven me to understand how things are made. I kid you not.
I'm telling you,
That
the
triggered
entire show,
everything.
how it's made, is
Yeah.
based off of the crayon video.
That picture episode,
Pretty much.
it warps my neurology to become fascinated and a drive to understand how things work. That is the moment my life changed in any direction, because
Mhm.
until then I was just a pile of mush getting into things. This made me
Core
go,
memory.
yeah, exactly. If you were to
Yep.
put me in Inside
Yep.
Out, core memory was formed. Now I'm like, wait, if that's how that's made, how are other things made? And yeah,
When we
I'm
get to my show, we have a video on how things are made,
oh
and it's
god,
very
Ooh.
good.
Oh,
yes. Is
Nice.
it the bread one? I know what you're doing.
No,
I'm
no.
excited though. I'm ready.
So, picture. This video is talking about how they take pictures of stars, which was very interesting to be like, as a young kid, you're like, wait, you can take pictures of stars?
Yeah.
It's and so he talks about this specific astronomer taking pictures of stars with a telescope camera. And here I am at 43, like, that's fascinating. Wow.
I
I want to
mean,
see more of
think
that.
about how excited we get when NASA like tweets out photos. Like, still, we're all like,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Holy
give
crap!
Yes.
me
Mhm.
space,
Yep.
space, dinosaurs,
Yes.
universal. Give me
Mm-hmm.
all of it. Just put it right in our
Yeah.
veins. We're
Yep.
ready.
Hit it.
Pretty much. And Mr. Rogers just narrating through it, there's stars, and those big white clumps are a bunch of stars together.
and that telescope camera that took photos on glass.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Loved that.
Yeah.
So cool.
That's the 43-year-old in me is like, okay, tell me more about that. Tell me more. I want to know more.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, kids don't need to know all that. They'll learn it later, and I can find it out later too. Fine, whatever. Um, and then we come back, and he goes back to the table with the stars. And here's the thing that I found very interesting watching a couple episodes, trying to figure out which one to go with. He starts talking about yesterday we pretended with Ground Pear and Daniel the Striped Tiger that they were going to make a prize for Don Quixote. He constantly was telling a story in make believe that went through many episodes. Like that happened all the time, and I did not remember that
Mm-mm.
as
I
much.
didn't remember. Because I remember make believe pretty clearly. I remember a lot of it. I did not remember the Eiffel Tower. And I certainly
Mhm.
did not remember that Daniel Striped Tiger's grandfather was French. Did not
Mhm.
catch that part.
Oh,
I
Nope.
what
I was like, "What is this?"
we'll talk about that later. I got some catching up later on in life
Oh.
of that. So, um but yeah, so he's talking about make believe, and it took me a second until they got it later in there to realize it's Donkey Hody,
Oh,
not
yeah.
Don
Donkey
Quixote.
As
Hody.
soon as I heard that, that was one of my
Mhm.
notes, was just Don Quixote.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
like, that
Mhm.
is, oh, I love that.
Brilliant.
More
Yep.
more than I can say.
So the one thing we missed from this episode that we didn't get, that I'm just a little sad about, but
Mhm.
I'll be okay with it, is we don't get Trolley
And there was such an
taking us
Yeah.
to
easy
make believe.
in.
Right.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
had the star. He had
Yeah.
it. We could have just sent it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no trolley.
But instead they just transitioned with his picture of the star to the
Mhm.
star that so Grandpere, Daniel Tiger, and Lady Aberlane.
Forgot about her entirely.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then I was like, "Oh,
No,
now
she's
I
the one I
remember."
Okay.
remember the most in Make Believe for sure.
So I forget all the time that she was in Dogma.
Mhm.
The opening of Dogma, and Steven, you've seen it now, so now
Yes, I
you know
have.
that you will know this. The opening scene of Dogma in the airport where Matt Damon is talking to the nun, that is Lady Aberlane.
Holy cow.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. I
Dog.
mean, she's known for Mr. Rogers, but she is a well-known actor outside of that too. Um, so yeah, they're making this star. Um, and they're making it as a prize for Don Quixote for everything apparently he's been doing with getting them potatoes and stuff. Um, and they've basically got a big cutout star, and they're putting little stick-on stars, which you lick to stick them on.
I forgot about moisture adhesive gold
Mhm.
stars. But then I saw them and I was like, yes, because we used to go to Paperama, the stationery store, which was my favorite store to go to when I was a child because yeah. And I do remember accidentally buying the moisture adhesive stars instead of self stick, and that being like a problem for
Mhm.
Oh no.
me.
Yeah, I remember that
um,
happening to me as
but
well.
Dad got me a little sponge, and then everything was fine.
It's like a
Yeah.
We
disaster.
laugh
And you
about
realize,
it.
how do you even work these things?
What is this? These are
Like
not sticking.
decals on model cars and stuff. I remember I got my first
Yes.
decal set.
Oh,
And I'm like,
yeah.
how do you do? These aren't stick. What am I doing? How does this
What's
work?
going on?
Like
I
it's stupid.
Also, I have to say, Amy's favorite store, being the stationery store as a
I
child, is
know.
her version of Stephen watching Taxi.
Yeah.
I had a box. My mom, because I played a lot of pretend, right? Like that was a big thing for me. I played a lot of pretend. And I had an office box. And my mother tells the story. Like this definitely cost her like $100 in, 1987. And it was just full of like, like the guest check like for a waitress with the carbon paper
Mhm.
and
Oh yeah.
like check
Uh-huh.
registers and like all kinds of stuff so that I could play office.
Oh, that's adorable. This is
Yeah.
this is telling. Like I think I'm seeing that this has always been in your DNA.
Yeah.
This
Mhm.
creative. You went. I mean, the paper store was your favorite place. Like
Mhm.
that's just it's. It's
Oh
funny.
yeah.
We don't really change, do we? We just get more money
No.
and responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Responsibility. Yeah.
So Lady Aberlane hears the king, who is her uncle, calling her for some reason. So she goes over there. She takes a little star with her. It's funny because she's talking to Daniel about it, and it's like he'll probably call it something different, like a diminutive stellar orb,
Mhm.
which she goes over there and he does, and then he does
Immediately.
a version of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in his super sophisticated talk.
Dude, this immediately
So
made me think of
good.
that meme of the classical guy doing the raps.
Mhm.
Like
Yes.
women with
Yes.
adequate posterior make the Earth take the
Yeah.
proper position in
There's
space, or something. And you're
there
like,
Yeah.
what?
there's a lady on TikTok I follow that does this for everything. Like they ask her to translate this or that, and she
Yeah,
just does it in that same way, and it was beautiful.
as Mr. Rogers was the OG. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
Mhm.
Imagine that.
right?
Like, why are we keep saying it and we're surprised?
Yeah,
Okay.
No.
we could say
Yeah.
like the Simpsons did it, but probably Mr. Rogers did it first.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And cleaner.
Yeah, and cleaner.
so Lady Aberlane comes back. Daniel has fallen asleep. And one thing that is talked about after the fact is the fact that Daniel has never slept away from home, his clock tower.
Mm.
So this was a big deal.
Mhm.
Um, so they finish Grandpere and Lady Aberlane work on finishing up the star. Grandpere puts a blanket on Daniel and just lets him sleep. Next morning, we hear Trolley. We at least hear Trolley.
Yeah.
And it wakes up Daniel, and Daniel's like, "What's going on? Where am I?
Yeah,
What's going on?"
I've been there
Oh,
before, Daniel.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like that took me back to when you fall asleep in the car
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Oh
and
yeah.
then you wake up when you get there and you're like, what is reality is not where what is
Mm-hmm.
happening.
Or just waking
This
up at
is
your
not where I
cousin's
started. What
house
happened?
and you like
Yeah.
wake up, you're like, "Where?" It takes you like 5 minutes to figure out what's going
Mm-hmm.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The worst one that happened, it happened to me once, is I fell asleep in the car, and I was probably 16, maybe 17 almost, but, I got picked up from work. I worked at a sub shop. My mom picks me up. I fell asleep in the car. I woke up when we got home, but it had been like 2 hours. My mom stopped at the store and like did some shopping and just let me sleep. So I'm like, oh, okay, we're home. Wait, why is the sun going down? What happened?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
So Daniel wakes up and then figures out, oh, hey, I'm at the Eiffel Tower. Compere and Lady Elaine come back and tell him what happened. And he is super proud of himself for sleeping away from home.
As a big homebody, that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I do also feel like I deserve a gold star every time I sleep away from home.
Yep. Well, and
Yeah.
again, this is something talking to kids, not necessarily talking directly to them, but, talking to kids about sleeping away from home
Because
and
as a
how
kid, you
it's
look at
okay.
Daniel, you go, yeah, no, I
Mhm.
know. It's
Daniel did it.
terrible.
Maybe I can do it. Um, and so he sees they finished the star. I think they gave him one more diminutive stellar orb to place. And then they go over to visit Don Quixote and Harriet Elizabeth Cow. Give
Harriet
Donkey.
Elizabeth Cow came from way back in my brain. It was like,
Yeah.
bam. Oh, yeah, Harriet Elizabeth Cow. Wow, that
Hmm.
happened.
Um, and they're going to give Donkey his star prize. But they also witness their Don Quixote's machine, the washer, dryer, sorter, dumper
Yeah.
that
I need that
takes
for
the
my
vegetables.
clothes.
Yeah.
I need that for my clothes.
Yeah.
Like if my laundry could just go into a washer, dryer, sorter, dumper.
Yes,
terrific.
please. That'd be great.
I just want dryers to start being able to eject the clothes, and then like the washing machine just like dump the washed clothes into the, like if they
Into
could
the
come as a
dryer.
unit. You know, I
Yeah.
don't even care if it's like Pee Wee Herman level Rube Goldberg stuff. Just make it happen.
Yeah.
See, I was thinking more Doc Brown.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Than
That's fine.
something that'd work.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of Rube Gold. You could Ernest P. Worrell. You know, he had some
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that
yeah.
going
Mhm.
on. Just make it happen. In industry, get on that.
Yep.
It's 2023 already.
We should have a washing machine
We're
that
supposed to have
automatically
flying cars, the
transfers.
least that we can do.
Mhm.
Right.
So we've given Don Quixote his prize. He wants to share it with everybody and just give a kiss to the whole wide world, which he does. And then we come back to Mr. Rogers. And like Amy said earlier, he says, let's go to Chef Brockett's bakery. We will clean up later. And I made a note of that because I was like, okay, are we going to actually clean up later? Spoiler alert, we will.
We do.
Yep.
It's easy when you just put things into the drawer, though.
Right.
If I had a drawer, I feel like
Mhm.
I'd be better about cleaning.
If you had a
It's not
drawer,
true.
just any
It's not
drawer,
true.
Yeah.
Just
anywhere.
one.
Just
But
You
we
should
should.
see my
before we
nightstand
get to
drawer.
the
I promise it gets bad.
It's real bad.
Mhm.
before we go to the bakery though, I had forgotten about Daniel Tiger's little gold watch that he
Yes.
wears. It was so adorable.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I had to mention that. I was because
Yep.
it was one of my notes was just the little gold watch.
Mhm.
It's so cute.
Yep. And for those of you who forgot, Mr. Rogers is doing most of those puppets,
Yeah.
which is why you don't see him. It was
And
him and
voices.
at least one or two other
Yeah.
people helping him out because he doesn't have forearms, so he's not doing everything.
Yeah.
So we go to the bakery, and this is when I was like, "Oh yeah, we actually go through the neighborhood again, and we get the camera pan around the neighborhood and
Yep.
around the corner to the actual bakery." Um, and we walk in, talk to Chef Brockett, and we go up to visit with Mrs. McFeely and Chrissy, who's sitting there having a little treat.
That
This is
conversation was every conversation I've ever had with a child.
Yeah.
yes,
Like you feel like because at one point she says something about her mom. I forget what it was, but like the whole time you're expecting her to like drop the secrets. You know
Mhm.
how like once you have children, you have no secrets anymore because
Yeah.
they will tell people everything.
Mhm.
I kept waiting for like the deep dark secrets to come out.
hmm and not just talking with Chrissy. I think the whole bakery coming into the bakery, who he's saying hi to, is again one of these things where we are not shouting to the world, but we are simply telling the world this is who in our neighborhood.
Yep.
Because we talked to Neil to ask if we can borrow his chair, an Asian guy sitting at the table.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We talked to Jose, who's dispensing drinks. He's obviously Hispanic. The fact that we have an Asian and Hispanic guy and we're just casually talking about him, like, I think we underestimate how big a deal this means in the
Yeah.
early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because Mr. Rogers was that guy that everybody was important. Everybody was special.
Yeah.
Nobody was not special. And I think it's cool to see this and kind of be reminded that, like, this was a statement he was making on his show
Mm-hmm.
and just making it. Like, again, not drawing attention, just simply having it. And then we talked to Chrissy. It's funny because the description for
Yeah.
this episode
Yeah.
specifically says that Chrissy has spina bifida. They never talk about it at all. They
No.
never mention it. It's just after the conversation's done, they start fixing her leg braces.
Yeah.
Um, and she talks about her braces and needing them and whatever. But that's about it. She's still going on and on as a little kid does, who cannot shut up once you
Talk
get them
about tomato
talking.
soup.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
We're
she's
gonna eat
proud.
tomato
She's gonna
soup. We're gonna
make-
get extra tomatoes that we're just gonna eat.
Mhm.
And I was like,
Love it.
oh, real good tomatoes, man.
Yeah.
That's what I miss about my grandma's. My grandma grew the best tomatoes, and we put a little, just like a little bit of mayo on them.
Oh yeah. You and my brother-in-law would
Yeah.
get along. His tomato sandwiches every summer, they're like an inch thick and just mayonnaise
Yeah.
and tomato.
No, it's too much, but it was just that. No bread,
Yeah.
just tomatoes,
Just,
a little bit of mayonnaise,
Mm-hmm.
little pepper.
And the thing
And
about
I-
this conversation with this little girl is it's to show, like, Daniel's proud he slept over, right? And she's proud of her being able to fasten her braces quick because she was talking about how much
Mhm.
faster she was getting. And it's cool to watch Mr. Rogers interact with her because he's talking to her like a person. Like, he
Yeah.
sees her. Like, it's not like you just kind of disregard a kid and you talk to the adult there.
He
Like,
says, "What are you women up to today?"
yeah.
Mhm.
Which I thought was really cute.
It's very
Yep.
endearing. Yeah. It was just cool.
And then she just goes, I love when she was talking about going back to school
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
and needing a tutor right now, and tutor means teach.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
thank you, Chrissy, for letting me know.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad
I
glad
appreciate
you let
that.
us know.
Yeah.
Because that's not a
Um,
word that maybe you would know.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then she walks out on her crutches with her leg braces, and it's just like, okay, she's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And she scoots right out
Yeah.
of there too. She's
Oh,
getting
yeah.
quick
She
on
does.
those.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That was one of the things that I really noticed rewatching this, and I mean I knew it already, but Square One TV last week did sort of the same thing where Fred Rogers never talked down to kids and he never talked past the kids. He always engaged with them,
Yeah.
and he engaged with the show, engaged with kids, and that was the thing with Square One was kind of the same thing where it treats them like people
Mm-hmm.
instead of little weirdos that kids are. They are little weirdos.
They are.
We know
Mhm.
this, but to treat them the way that he did, there was like even just the stars when he's drawing those out. It's a geometry lesson, but it's
Yeah.
framed as just we're going to draw. And so for kids, that draws in their attention. They're going to pay attention to that because we're being tricked into learning something,
Yeah.
basically,
Mhm.
in a way, but not in a sinister way. It's just like knowing the psychology of children. And I think that goes a long way. And it was really cool to see that interaction with Chrissy at that table. I really enjoyed that.
Mhm.
You're looking at two schools of thought of children's television. There's the distract the kids and babysit them, and then there's the
Yeah.
treat them like humans that you can engage with. Like, there's very few shows that today that I've been real excited about for like Sam to watch, and one of them is called Tumbleleaf on Amazon Prime. And I remember when he was getting to where we were comfortable him watching TV, that show respected a kid's intelligence like few others that I'd seen. Like, it was about let's figure stuff out together and we're friends, and it wasn't like just watch the thing run around in a circle and fall over. Ah, it's funny. It was like here's an intelligent little animal working through a problem with his friends and solving the puzzle, and it
I
was
mean,
just a
kids
joy.
are kids are so smart. Like
Yeah.
my little niece is a little over a year and a half old, and she helps my sister cook,
Hmm.
and she knows how to spread the olive oil. She wants to taste all the spices, even the ones that are not very good. Like onion powder, she's like, "Yeah, let me taste it." Okay, all right, registered, thank you. And
Mhm.
she's a good little chef, and like she knows all about trees and plants. And she's like 18 months old,
Yeah.
you know.
They're so
They're little
much more
sponges.
capable than we give them
Yeah.
credit. But it takes
Yeah.
And I
time
think
and it takes effort and it takes
Mm-hmm.
being quiet for a little bit and just sitting with someone, and that's what Mr. Rogers excelled at.
Yep.
well, and you mentioned it earlier, but his empathy too. He
Mhm.
can feel he can empathize with the children and feel what they're feeling, and that goes a long way.
Mhm.
And I think that's
Mhm.
a big thing about the things that Mr. Rogers teaches. Like, sure, we learned a little bit of geometry, and sure, sometimes we learn about colors or we learn things like
Mhm.
that, but that was not the focus,
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
really. Like, that was all extra. We were learning how life works, right? Like, Mr.
Mhm.
McFeely shows up, and now we know how packages are delivered. You know what I mean? Like, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, no, that's how mail works, right? You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, this is how I go to a bakery and I have a beverage in a very reasonably sized
And this
glass.
is how I include a Hispanic member of my neighborhood. I say
Mhm.
gracias to him,
Yep.
you
Yeah.
know, because we so often think inclusiveness means inviting people who are different culture to your barbecue, but really it's about learning about them and engaging in their culture.
Yeah.
And Mr.
Mhm.
Rogers did that. He went out of his way to
Mhm.
make time to understand other people. It teaches you
Yeah.
an enormous amount about how to interact
Yeah.
with the world
Mhm.
around you. Getting someone's name. Oh my
Mhm.
word. I've tried to start practicing this when I meet like a stranger who I can have a second with. I go, "What's your name?" Immediately, brain, they're just like, "Oh, like, holy cow.
Yeah.
I'm meeting
Mhm.
someone who
Yeah.
sees me as a person." And I remember them because it's like, wow, they really, really just asking who they were really changed their day. Okay.
Then it's funny because he brings the conversation back to talking about stars and talking
Mhm.
about people as stars and how
That got
people
deep.
I needed
brighten
that
up the
today.
Him and
world.
Don got deep. I did too. I
I
have had a
needed it.
day and I was like, thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Rogers.
he
Thank
looked
you,
me
Mr.
Mhm.
straight in the eye and told me
Rogers.
that I mattered, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh
Thank
man,
you. I
okay."
really needed that.
I promised I wouldn't cry on the internet, but like I needed to hear that today.
Yep. He dropped the mic and then dropped a quarter in Jose's hand for the
For the
juice.
juice. I did want pineapple juice after that. I was like,
Yeah.
"Ah,
So did
pineapple
I.
juice is
Mhm.
good." And it comes in a can. Why? Why
Yeah.
do we still put pineapple juice in a giant can? That's how it comes.
That's the only
Why?
fruit that eats you back, you know?
That is true.
Yeah. Well, at that point, I think everything was still in the can no matter what. So,
Yeah.
That's true.
Potato chips in a can.
um,
Mm.
then we head back to Mr. Rogers' place. Um, and he cuts out one of the stars. And I found it interesting that he just let it go. Like we didn't do a cut or anything. We see him cutting the entire time.
Yeah, all right, but Fred, you gotta cut into angles, my man.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's way
Yeah.
easier. Just cut into the angles. It took me a long time to learn that, and I feel like
Mhm.
if he had done it, I would have caught on a little earlier.
And so he cuts it out and then he's like, close your eyes. Let's feel the points. That's knowing by feeling.
Hmm.
And then he drops one more knowledge bomb. It's like lots of ways of knowing in this world. I was just like, oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Yes, there
Thank
are
you,
a lot
Mr.
of ways of
Rogers.
knowing in this world.
Thank
A
you.
lesson we still need to this
Mhm.
freaking day.
Hmm.
Good Lord. And then he does actually clean up the paper and
Yep.
marker,
Yep.
puts them away, um, goes and tells you how special you are, puts his normal shoes back on, hangs up his sweater, puts on his jacket, um, sings one more song, and says, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And that's an
Yeah.
episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Oh,
It is. I do have a question. Did he put his other shoes on? Because I was watching and I don't remember him putting them on. I think he just walked out in his socks.
No, I
Yeah,
think they're
probably.
slip-ons. It's
yeah.
not a big
Mhm.
deal like putting the sneakers on where you've got to tie
Mhm.
them. I
Hmm.
think they're just slip-on loafers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Fine. Fine.
I'm just saying.
Fine. Next time.
So, yeah, that was our episode. Now we've talked about him, this show having one heck of a legacy. Again, talking to kids about their feelings, about their anger. He talked to them about being sick and how some people in this world just don't like other people who are different. Um, Here's a couple of facts about. In 1997, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood broke the record previously held by Captain Kangaroo as the longest running children's television series. And it held that title until 2003. And, Sesame Street
Sesame
surpassed it.
Street,
But,
yeah.
Yeah.
Sesame Street is a juggernaut.
mhm. But the final episode aired in 2001. It ran regularly on most PBS stations, regularly daily until 2007. And it started getting removed from daily syndication in August 2008. To this day, though, there are many PBS stations that still show it weekly on a Saturday or Sunday. So it is still aired regularly all over the place.
And Daniel
Um,
Tiger's still around.
Yeah, Daniel Tiger's
Well,
kind of.
I was going to say, part of that legacy is the show of Daniel Tiger. So Mr. Rogers died. Fred Rogers died in 2003. In 2006, 3 years after that, um, Blue's Clues ended its production.
Let me tell you, my high school friends and I loved Blue's Clues in the way that only elder millennials can. And
Yep.
I still have my
Yep.
handy dandy notebook. I love that show.
So the creator of Blue's Clues is a woman by the name of Angela Santamero. She created Blue's Clues, Super Y, and a couple others for PBS. Once Blue's Clues ended, the Fred Rogers company contacted her to see what type of show she'd create to promote Rogers' legacy. In 2012, that show, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, premiered. Daniel Tiger, if you don't know, is set entirely in the neighborhood of make believe, and it focuses on Daniel Tiger, who is the son of Daniel the Striped Tiger from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Okay.
Like, Daniel has a bunch of friends his age, and all their parents are also much of the other puppet characters from the land of make believe. And it's still teaching great lessons. I will say Daniel Tiger's whole episode and book on going potty was a big winner in our house when it came to potty training. And it's still going today. I talked about this, I think off show a couple weeks ago, that there's a guy who, Greg Miller, who runs Kind of Funny video game
Mhm.
thing. When he tweeted about making the connection between Daniel Tiger and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and it blew his mind. I was like, "Yup, welcome to the party,
Mhm.
pal."
Mhm.
And it's funny because Daniel Tiger uses a lot of the same things when he comes in to the neighborhood. He rides on trolley. Trolley takes everybody everywhere. He comes into
Public
his house and he puts on a little
transit.
sweater. What was that, Amy?
Public transit.
Uh-huh.
Let's go.
Mhm.
Yep. Puts on his little sweater, just like Mr. Rogers. Sings his little song. But yeah, so that's still going today. I think they just got renewed for another season, so we'll be seeing more. There's one other one that is actually just happening in the last year, spinoff of Don Quixote.
Ah, cool.
It is pretty far from the source material, other than just the names. It's in a, I forget the exact place it is, but it's not in make believe. It's like just north of make believe in a totally different town, and so there's all other different characters entirely. Um, but they're still doing it, still producing it, still using it. So yeah, Mr. Rogers' legacy lives on in public broadcasting. Um, and again, his shows are still being run. You can find plenty of them on YouTube. There was some on Amazon, all kinds of stuff. Like I said, there's been plenty of documentaries and movies reminding us who he was and what he's done. So yeah, that's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
But how much nostalgia and good feeling can you pack into 29 minutes? Because there was a ton of it in
Yeah.
this entire episode.
Mhm.
Just that
Mhm.
warm feeling the whole time, and that kindness that Fred Rogers had, the empathy and kindness he had towards everyone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We just, you know, I don't mean to turn this into societal commentary or anything, but like for a good 15 years post Mister Rogers' passing, like we didn't have like a central figure, or maybe we didn't respect it enough. He went through a very snarky phase um
Mm.
in culture and television, and like wise
Mhm.
guy snarkiness, big guy wins. And I feel like here recently, like especially with the, you know, you had your Mr. Rogers movies came out, kind of put some more
Mhm.
focus back on like, oh wow, you know, because there was a subset of society that's like Mr. Rogers just tells everyone they're special, and now everybody thinks they're God's gift to humanity, which was not his message
No.
Right.
necessarily. But like then you had shows like Ted Lasso's come out. It's been a big deal because it's got a
Mhm.
set of people with heart and trying to make their way through the world, and that's been a really big hit. And then you got like the New Amsterdam Hospital show my wife and I were watching about people trying to figure out how to help other people, and it was less about drama and getting at each other, not so much house, more like let's try to solve problems together. And I feel like there's a thirst for this more positive angle of people trying to do good amidst difficult circumstances versus like
Yeah.
Mhm.
people trying to
Mhm.
beat out each other for things. Like we're
Sure.
now craving more of a us against the world instead of us against each other kind of media. And I wonder if like if the Mr. Rogers resurgence helped move some of that along. Maybe people do actually like positivity.
Mhm.
I don't
There
know.
was a wonderful little comic that came out a couple years ago of Mr. Rogers interacting with Thor. That was
Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely
Yes.
delightful.
I love that one.
And again, teaching the same way he did, asking Thor, "Can I pick up your hammer?" And Thor's like, "Some people can't. They consider it immovable." It's like, "Huh, feels all right to me."
Mhm.
And just talking about carry, basically, he was talking to Thor about what we carry and
Mhm.
how some things are heavier for other people, and that's okay because they can carry other stuff.
Yeah. I love that so much.
So,
Mr.
yeah.
Rogers is just an absolute hero of mine. And it was
Mhm.
like Amy, you were talking about earlier, the whole like I would punch a person for saying Mr. Rogers
I
was
I would
weak.
I
Because
would throw
Yeah.
like
hands for
it's
Mr.
legit,
Rogers.
because there is people out there that would look at Mr. Rogers and go weak. But what kind of strength is it to be able to deny yourself the anger, frustration, and hate that's so much easier to do when you don't
Yeah.
understand a thing? And
Yeah.
Mr.
Mhm.
Rogers had the wherewithal and the ability to deny himself that in favor of I'd rather understand that person
Yeah.
Yeah.
than harbor this ill will. That's
The other one of the other things that he did was he had the Wicked Witch from The
yes.
Wizard of Oz
Mhm.
come on. And he did a clown one too, where it's like these things that like kids can find scary. And it's like, no, look, it's just a person. Like we're gonna
Yeah.
do this and we're gonna see it's still me and I'm just dressed up like a clown. Or look, it's still her. We talked to her and
Mhm.
yep, she's got a scary voice, but it's okay. She's just in
Hmm.
a fancy outfit. Look at this dress.
Yeah, it's just and he took
Let
the
me help you
time
with
to
your
do all
zipper.
that. There's just you
Yeah.
She's
could
got
go
a
out on the
zipper.
internet, you'll find numerous stories of Mr. Rogers and people who interacted with him where he
Yeah.
just felt like what is it going to cost me 10 minutes to just to sit with a person and
Yeah.
talk to them about what they got going on?
I was
Just
gonna
And
say,
incredible.
if there's anything that he has a legacy for is what you said, he took the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just took
yeah,
the time.
That was
it's
it.
the difference between being a nice person and being a kind person. Fred
Yeah.
Rogers was a kind person because he would give of himself unquestioningly. Like,
Hmm.
he would take that time because he knew that it was going to enlighten and enrich and enhance this other person's life for a few minutes, and it cost him nothing but a few minutes of his time.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was more than willing to give that at any point. And
Mhm.
that's what made him special. It's a different kind of strength
Hmm.
that he had.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we could
All
be
right.
here for days because
Yeah.
I could
We
talk
could.
about this man until the cows come home.
I didn't check the email. Did we get any response for this one at all? Any feedback at those were the days show at gmail.com?
I didn't see any.
Or those
However,
days
I
show
will
on
double
Twitter?
check.
So yeah, let us, on anything, but especially, if something hits you with Mr. Rogers, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
Again, those were the days show at gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter, those days show. Or come hang out in the Legion of Dorks Discord channel. We're always primed to talk to you about Mr. Rogers or whatever. So yeah. Again, we're here if you want to come hang out for the live recording, like some of our awesome guests tonight. We record Monday nights a little after 9 p.m. over at twitch.tv/2dorkstv. Feel free to come hang out with us there. Hang out in the chat. Let us know. Lots of people sharing good stories about PBS and Mr. Rogers in the chat and
Yeah.
all the ways it touched them. So, really appreciate you guys, Skeezix and Grim the Barbarian, talking about how the ways PBS and Mr. Rogers touched you. But for now, we've got a couple of breaks coming up.
Mm-hmm.
The first being next week. I think Steven talked about putting a rerun in the feed or something.
Yeah, we'll figure
But
something
after we come back, Steven will be bringing us another educational show. And
Oh,
that
yeah.
show is
Buckle your seatbelts, because we're getting on the magic school bus, baby.
Oh boy.
It took me a while to figure out what I was gonna do, and then I was like, "Oh snap! Is that old enough? That's old enough for sure." So we're gonna
Mhm.
be
Dang it.
watching. Miss Frizzle's gonna take us on a field trip. Is what I'm saying. We're going on the Magic School Bus for episode 10. The Magic School Bus plays ball. This particular episode pops into my mind all the time. And I'm super duper excited to watch it with you guys. So this will be great. So it's on Netflix. Which I was about to say Netflix for free. Netflix is not free, but everybody has it for the most part. So
Yeah.
go watch the Magic School
Mhm.
Bus. Episode 10. I don't think the old series is broken into seasons. They just had like 13 episodes, and this was one of them. So we'll be watching that.
Very cool. All right. Well, Mr. Rogers loved to open and close his shows with a song. So why not us too? Because it's such a good feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling. You're growing inside. And when you wake up ready to say, I think I'll make a snappy new day. It's such a good feeling, a very good feeling. The feeling you know that I'll be back when the day is new. And I'll have more classic TV for you. And you'll have things you'll want to talk about. I will too, because it's you we like. See you in a couple weeks, everybody.
Those Were the Days is brought to you with a partial grant from the Sears and Roebuck Company.